All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello, all. It is I know. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your recorded adulation. I am Mark. Albert is here along with Kim
Albert,
as well.
thank you.
And we are,
Kim, how are you?
Ready to do the work of this show, which will cover a lot of different topics. It is a solemn day, I would say, given the anniversary of 9/11. It's being memorialized in many different ways, and sadly, the shadow cast over much of the 9/11 memorial is associated with the murder of right-wing activist Charlie Kirk yesterday. It happened while we were on the air. A lot of details are now beginning to come out, fragments of details. There's a lot of opinion around it, and there's also a lot of information that is being twisted, I'd suggest, around this murder. But any way you calculate it, it's a horrible, horrible thing. Political violence is the road to ruin, and violence generally is the road to ruin. And so it is with that we continue today. A lot about that, but we will start with 9/11 and get on to even some other things today. I'm wearing the shirt Born to Peacefully Resist is the shirt. You can find it at getmarkmerch.com along with other shirts like it. It's a reminder that a peaceful protest is the way to go in the forum of ideas, in the forum of philosophies, in the forum even of political strategies. Peaceful rhetoric is always the road to travel. Born to Peacefully Resist is on all of these different shirts. I'm wearing one of them, but there are more available at getmarkmerch.com. It's a way to support the show. By the way, if your jam is more other stuff, there's a bunch of other merch there on the site. Season of Peaceful Protest, there are cardigans and all the rest. But anyway, my point is simply on this day when we are looking back at 9/11, and we're also going to examine the political violence and the rising tide of political violence in America. It bears remembering that peaceful protest is the only sort of acceptable protest there should be. I welcome all of you who are into the chat early. This is a 2-hour live show. We're on from 2 to 4 in the East, 11 to 1 in the West. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Mark, Kim, Albert. The calls are coming in. The earliest participants in the chat, we always like to set aside. Mario and John. Aloha Remarkables, says John Watson. Indeed. The 9/11 act of terrorism was obviously a horrible thing, but it produced a series of horrible events that drew this country into a confrontation with the Arab world, into a complicated war that had nothing to do with 9/11. The 9/11 horror that was wrought by Osama bin Laden and devotees of his murderous philosophy. It's sort of the law of unintended consequences. The act was used as an excuse to begin a war in Iraq, to begin an attack on a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. If you look at the roots of 9/11, those who committed these heinous acts, they go back to Saudi Arabia, funding from the Saudis. if you go back and look at 9/11, you could see and even on some level defend the reprisal from the U.S. on Afghanistan and the Afghani terrorist camps that existed there. As I say, the logic there at least makes some sort of reasonable sense. But what the Bush administration did was they took it and used it and pivoted to attacking Iraq, to the point that false intelligence information was concocted. And now, as we look at the Freedom Tower, as we look at the memorial for 9/11, the loss of lives, so horrifyingly awful in this insanely brutal way that changed the U.S. forever and changed the city of New York forever. It changed our view of the geopolitics of terrorism forever. And of course, it destroyed families and loved ones, those who were first responders in New York, the heroic men and women of the fire department, the heroic men and women of the police department, the heroic men and women who responded to the need for all hands on deck to look for survivors, to begin the grim task of going through the wreckage of the Twin Towers. And there you see George Bush, if you're watching on YouTube, alongside a firefighter there at Ground Zero. And I'll remind you of something. After the war in Iraq, of course, and after the absurdity of getting America into a war in Iraq, based on some complicity of the Iraqis in the 9/11 attack, the Saddam Hussein connection, which was completely concocted. Not saying Saddam Hussein was a friend of the U.S. or a friend of anything righteous, brutal dictator, but not connected to 9/11. But that said, when you're seeing this picture right now, keep in mind, George Bush, and this is completely understandable, with an attack on the United States of America, was at a tremendous approval rating. He had tremendous support from the U.S. I'm talking about the population of the United States rallied behind this president, regardless of where you were. And there's Rudy Giuliani on the left in this picture, and he's been dining out on being America's mayor and what he did on 9/11. He's been dining out on that since this happened, since this tragedy hit New York. And there, in the background, you can see Chuck Schumer. You end up with I think that's de Blasio in the background as well. You can, I don't know the name of that firefighter there. I'm sure he's someone in an official position, but this is the kind of image that did burnish in the American consciousness a sort of strength that was represented by public officials and the call to strike back, to do something. And so something was done, as I say, part of it was defensible, and then, of course, the Iraq part was not. But, I mean, if you want to read a book about how the cake was already baked on Iraq, and from a guy who's reported on the Pentagon, I think the Ricks book is excellent. Thomas Ricks, I think is his name. And it's called Fiasco, as I recall. And you can read all about it, how this cake was baked for the attack on Iraq before 9/11 even happened. And it was quickly served up once 9/11 did happen. But the reality is the loss of life, the twisted lives, the true tragedy of 9/11 is something that has left a permanent scar on this country and for all of us. I'm sure for you watching and listening. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a clear sense of how you felt violated. It was so profoundly tragic. And so at Ground Zero, you see these memorials today in America, in New York City. Now, as you might expect, there has been an outpouring of support for the memory of so many who lost their lives, so many families, so many first responders, as noted, I think, in the chat, those who ran into the horror, even as it was clear that these buildings were collapsing. Jim Slayton says with a $5 super chat, never forget 9/11. Honoring the lives lost, the heroes who ran toward danger, and the families who carry their memory. Exactly, and very well said. So, the president spoke, and you would expect that. You'd expect a deep-hearted sympathy to help memorialize on this day the tragedy of 9/11. Sadly, the president, while making a point of remembering the lost souls and remembering some of the heroes involved in rescuing many of those who certainly might have lost their lives in the 9/11 attack, Donald Trump, the president of the United States, turned quickly to attacking the left. That was made possible because of the murderous act perpetrated yesterday against conservative activist Charlie Kirk. I mean, to call Charlie Kirk a conservative activist is to greatly undersell what Charlie Kirk was. He was a transformational figure in the conservative movement. And what he understood was something that the old school conservatives didn't get. I mean, the Mitt Romneys of the world, even the Mitch McConnells of the world, didn't get the power of media, didn't get the way in which you can use media, didn't understand the real work that Charlie Kirk was doing with young Americans. And Charlie Kirk, he rallied a tremendous number of young people to show up at the polls this past election cycle. And Charlie Kirk was someone who the Trump family recognized as transformational. And I say the Trump family deliberately because Donald Trump was less aware of Charlie Kirk, I think I can argue effectively, than, for example, his son was. His son, Don Jr., was the one who brought him into the Trump world. And it was Charlie Kirk's power and effective manipulation of media. I mean, he was a good speaker. He brought the arguments that he had defending a conservative vision of America. And again, when I say conservative vision, it's a MAGA vision, which you could argue no longer represents conservatism. It represents something else. Conservatism would be less government. Conservatism would be a lot of things associated with personal freedoms that are now very much threatened. You can start with the women's right to choose. You can go on to even free speech, which is being threatened in many ways. Shutting down of media, the government involved in everything from an ownership in Intel to a powerful finger on the scale when it comes to the legal profession as a result of attacking legal institutions and law firms in Washington, et cetera. So these are all things that really fly in the face of any traditional conservatism that would take government away from all of that, right? You want less government affecting everything I just mentioned and beyond. But that then doesn't really represent what Charlie Kirk was talking about. He quickly became immersed in MAGA Nation. And Trump, as I say, the Trump family, they brought Charlie Kirk in close to them, and he became a part of the Trump team. And so when it came time to really roll out an election strategy, Charlie Kirk was a big, big part of it. So it is no wonder to me that Donald Trump is memorializing Charlie Kirk. And I'd say in the amount of time spent today talking about 9/11 memorializing and Charlie Kirk memorializing, Charlie Kirk wins that race. And the reason I think that's noteworthy is I think it speaks to priorities. So Charlie Kirk's powerful hand was something that was so very effective in creating a movement. And Turning Point USA was his baby. I mean, this young guy created Turning Point USA. And he went on to college campuses. He went to places where he could get healthy debate. Now, you could say it was like pro wrestling. He was kind of taking on debaters with an understanding that he was going to, have them shouted down by the crowd that collected. But to be fair to Charlie Kirk, I thought he really took on those who disagreed with him and those who were bringing the heat. He took them on regularly. That was kind of something that he liked doing. But also, to be fair to the argument, Charlie Kirk wasn't some regular old school conservative. This is a guy who had some very strong, loathsome views of the America that he saw. He made comments that were openly racist. Didn't he say something when I hear that, when I see that there's a black pilot on the plane, I get worried?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He had
some pretty interesting views about women as well.
Thank you. I was trying to figure out how to package it. Yeah.
He just said to Taylor Swift when she announced her engagement to Travis Kelce that it's time for her to obey her husband and that she better change her last name from Swift to Kelce or she won't really be meaning it. I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg on misogyny. That's how I hope he's remembered, for the things he said. That's what his legacy should be, not what appears to be some type of martyrdom that's in the works right now.
The reality is what Kim's talking about. There's been a whitewashing a bit of who Charlie Kirk was. And again, I've just said it and I'll say it over and over again. The murder of Charlie Kirk is completely unacceptable, and any political violence and any violence at all is completely unacceptable. I mean, full stop. But it's not fair to cherry pick who Charlie Kirk was, just like it's not fair to cherry pick political violence and suggest that it all comes from the left or it all comes from the right. I mean, the preponderance of evidence is that political violence in America right now is really very much carried out by the right. But that said, I don't want to whitewash that either. But whitewashing, which we often do, to be fair, when someone passes away, we kind of lionize them. We kind of just speak of them in ways in which we can all understand the mourning that takes place and the loss of this guy to his kids, to his wife. It's horrible. It's just heartbreaking. But who he was shouldn't be lost in all of this either. Karen Cooper says in the chat, I hadn't seen Charlie Kirk until I watched a video this morning. He was a big part of the increase in hate and violence in the U.S. that led to his ultimate destruction. Again, it is weirdly ironic. There's so much irony here, tragic irony. It is true. I got also an email about that. Now, those of us sort of in this political conversation regularly, we know Charlie Kirk, we know who he is, but I got this just this morning. Let me just...
I've received a lot of positive letters.
I heard the news about Charlie Kirk yesterday as it was breaking, and for the life of me, I said to myself, who is that? Who is Charlie Kirk? My wife then said, well, you don't watch Fox News, so it's no wonder you don't know. I don't watch Fox News, nor do I use social media, he says. I'm not influenced by people who say they are influencers, I guess. What does this say about me? I'm old or I'm out of touch? I'm not sure. I watch TV news, I read Apple News on my iPhone, listen to KCBS News here in the Bay Area several times a day. I also listen to the Mark Thompson show. Which one of you is Mark Thompson?
Hmm.
I used to listen to KGO before it did whatever it did. Ron Owens, Jim Eason, Pete Wilson, my favorite, Gene Burns. But I never heard of Charlie Kirk. Now I have. That's from A. Barton. Thank you for the email. I think Charlie Kirk might be someone that you wouldn't know if you're not in the media sphere that covers so much of what he does. But I would say that Turning Point USA, that was a pretty big movement. I mean, to not know that, I think, shows maybe a little bit of a blind spot. But to be fair, you may be focusing on your own set of priorities. When it comes to news, there's a lot to cover. So I think it's perfectly excusable if you didn't know Turning Point USA. But they, and this is why I wanted to make the point, they turned out a vote that, in my judgment, was more relevant to the winning that President Trump did in this last election than even Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan and many like him got the anti-vax movement a sort of critical mass. I think a lot of people were single-issue voters on anti-vaxxing. They didn't like the way things were handled under the Biden administration in relation to the vaccine, and that brought a lot of people to the polls. And then after that, I think it got hazy to them on policy. They filled the empty vessel of Donald Trump with whatever they wanted. Bad economy, immigration, whatever it might be. But what Charlie Kirk did was well beyond Joe Rogan. He motivated young people from college campuses to the youth of America who could really relate to him, and he motivated them in ways that, again, represented the MAGA sphere. It's what Kim is talking about. There was a lot of racism, sexism. There was, at its core, a kind of hate. Albert, you have...
Can I just mention, I just want to mention that I agree with the person who wrote the letter. I was also someone who didn't pay attention to Charlie Kirk, didn't agree with the message, and so kind of dismissed it as just this noise that I wasn't interested in hearing. But I was very surprised that yesterday, my daughter in the North Bay in high school called me. Everyone in high school, she said, at her school, was watching the video as it happened of Kirk getting shot. Same thing with a friend of mine, Nikki Maduro, in the South Bay. Her daughter also called her from high school, letting her know that Charlie Kirk was shot. Kids in high school know who he is across the Bay Area. And if they know in the Blue Bay Area, they certainly are talking about it across the country. I underestimated, I think, the reach that he had when it comes to young people in this country. And I was surprised that they all knew who he was. And I will also say, as someone said, they spent time watching videos of him yesterday because they had no idea who he was. That's something that conservatives are talking about and saying that somehow, this makes it okay, not okay, but more palatable, I guess, because now everyone knows who he is and now everyone's talking about him and now his message is being spread far and wide so he can rest in peace because he's done what he needed to do. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, his reach to particularly a younger group of people is super noteworthy, and that was his intent, to bring Turning Point USA to those younger people. So, right, it takes a younger person oftentimes to message to a younger population. We talk about political messaging on this show all the time. I think it's critical. I think that Charlie Kirk might have evolved, if he wanted to, into the kind of political figure who could have ascended to the presidency. He had that kind of constituency. Yeah. I mean, that's really how it's built. It's built through social media, through messaging. He went to universities, he went to schools. There was a lot of outreach. He did a lot of the heavy lifting. Yes, he was with Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom had Charlie Kirk in, and that was in the podcast, a massive, massive controversy. How many people in this country died yesterday, asked Christine Park. His death is no sadder than any of theirs. Well, it's not a question of sadder. But I would say his death is significant for the violence that it can actually produce to uncork the sort of political violence. I'm seeing references to it on Facebook. I'm seeing all sorts of references to, okay, now it's on. If this is what you wanted, you know, I can see we tried it the peaceful way. Now we'll try it a different way. Flying a flag at half-staff is insulting to the flag, actually, says Read More History. His murder is wrong, tragic, but he was a merchant of hatred. He just was. Well, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but yes, it's true. The president has asked for the flags in Washington to run at half-staff. He will, as I'm told, I believe his casket was traveling on Air Force Two, the vice president's plane, and J.D. Vance is actually squiring his remains back to Washington or wherever they're going. I was reading that just maybe an hour ago. But as to who he was, we'll get to that, and I think there are some pretty good thoughts on this. You want to start with that Jeff Charlotte cut? He's a professor at Dartmouth, and here's a little bit of him talking about both Kirk and this moment in time in America.
Amongst right-wingers and reading right-wing media and fascist media and understanding their imagination of the moment, which is, look, I'm not going to take away that they've lost one of their own, and I don't doubt some of them mourn him, but you also see a certain amount of glee rippling through that world. The language that I keep seeing is the gloves are off, everything's on the table. It's on, now it's time to do it, right? So there's a sense in which rather than mourning their fallen comrade, they're seeing it as, some are seeing it as license to further escalate political violence.
Well, Jeff Charlotte, if you could just provide some broader context, explain who Charlie Kirk was and the kind of extremely broad influence that he had. I mean, some have commented that, in fact, he was more important for Trump than some of his cabinet secretaries. Yeah,
this is what I was saying. Certainly,
yeah, I really think this is he's one of the great underestimated figures outside right-wing organizing circles, and that's because he had a 3-hour daily, a 3-hour talk show. He had a bigger presence on TikTok than most political figures. And so he was misunderstood as an influencer, and he was that. But primarily and fundamentally, what he was an organizer, and a very, very effective one. Political analysts quibble over how essential he was to swinging so much of the youth vote to Trump. But there's no question that he was a huge, huge part of it. And he did that by transforming far-right youth politics in America. The previous organizations had always been built around ideology, rather it was a kind of a William F. Buckley conservatism or libertarianism. And Kirk's insight was absolute devotion to the great leader, cult of personality, a central tenet of fascism. His politics would change. His enemies were Trump's enemies, whoever that was that day. He was in so many ways, and I think Trump viewed him this as the son he really wanted to have. A figure of tremendous influence, and I think that's important for us to understand, because the scale of the right-wing reaction is going to correlate with that.
Professor Charlotte, talk about Turning Point USA. What is the significance of this organization and his role in building it?
Guys, I kind of spoken to that already. I don't think I need to see this part, but thank you. I like the first part because I thought it really did speak to who he was, since so many, I think, here didn't know who he was, weren't familiar with him particularly. I really just wanted that first part for that. I also want to just, because I'm seeing in the chat people going, you got to be kidding me. Are they really going to go with the flags at half-staff? President Donald Trump ordering flags to be flown at half-staff following the fatal shooting of conservative influencer Charlie Kirk at a Turning Point USA event at Utah Valley University in Utah. Trump ordered the flags across the nation at military posts and at embassies to remain flown at half-staff until September 14th. This according to a White House proclamation. You know, he was shot during this Q&A. He was 31 years old, as you know. He was shot during this bizarre moment. And I say bizarre because, again, the scene is dripping with tragedy, but tragic irony. He was a real proponent of Second Amendment rights, meaning of gun rights. And it was in a moment and questioning of Kirk by someone in the audience about gun rights and about mass shootings. It was at that moment that and during that exchange, that he was shot and killed. I've heard every manner of conspiracy about who might be behind it. I even heard today, I just heard this morning, I guess it has to be today. It's just today and yesterday will run together, you know. I saw the most remarkable thing. I saw that it's a fake. He's still alive. Still shots from the video yesterday as he tips left. You know, you see the blood going this way, not going that way. I saw this entire thing. I saw a lot of it. Mm-hmm. I mean, so you're telling me that Charlie Kirk faked his own death to do what? He was already ahead of this incredible movement that likely would have produced another election win. He's going to rob his kids, 3 and 1 years of age, of a future dad? Come on. So, I mean, I've seen every manner of everything, and I've even seen sort of a more elegant conspiracy theory. And as you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but sometimes I think just because you're a conspiracy theorist doesn't mean there really isn't a conspiracy about the thing you're talking about. But on this one, we really have to wait and see. We really just don't know. So I'm the more elegant one is that it was set up by the right, that this is a designed hit, and you don't shoot someone from 200 yards away unless you're an experienced marksman. That said, there is a picture that's been released by the FBI. Albert, you have that? Here's the latest on the picture that they've identified a person of interest in. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. Let's get right to breaking news. The FBI is asking for help identifying this man who they are calling a person of interest in the shooting of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Sources tell ABC News ammunition found with the rifle was engraved with messages about transgender issues and anti-fascist ideology. Meanwhile, President Trump says he plans to speak to Kirk's family this afternoon. Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas has more on that. Pierre, what's the latest on this photo?
Diane, well, here's what we have and here's what we know. This picture is being put out by the FBI and law enforcement because they believe this is a person that they very much want to talk to. I'm told by sources it's from surveillance footage in and around the area where the shooting took place. And you can see this appears to be a male person wearing sunshades and a baseball cap. The FBI very much wants to talk to that person, and they're asking for the public's help in identifying this person so that they can get access to them and begin to interview them. Again, they want the public's help to identify this person so that they can talk to him. This person is being described to me as a person of interest, someone they very much want to talk to. And Diane, what you see unfolding, what you literally see unfolding is what we were discussing yesterday, is that the surveillance footage was going to be the key to the case. That's what my law enforcement sources were telling me last night. They believed that when they canvassed the campus and the areas around the campus, that they would be getting images of the suspect moving about, or a person of interest moving about, I should say. In this case, this is someone that they think could have information about the attack, and they want to talk to this person.
Yeah,
All right, very good. Thank you, Albert. I want to get now to Donald Trump, who has taken this event, and as I say, this memorializing of Charlie Kirk, discussion of who he is occurring in the shadow of the 9/11 memorial, or you could say the 9/11 memorial is occurring in the shadow of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But either way, the two are coming together in the remarks of Donald Trump. Trump speaking at the 9/11 memorial couldn't wait to apparently bring in these acts of political violence and blame the left. And of course, talk about his own prosecution and the way he's hounded by the left and the left-wing media as that thing which whips up this sort of political violence. Go ahead, Albert.
Fallen and sent an unmistakable message to every enemy around the world.
He's talking about
if you
9/11,
attack the
of course.
United States of America, we will hunt you down and we will find you. Go all over this sometimes magnificent earth. We will crush you without mercy and we will triumph without question. That's why we named the former Department of Defense the Department of War. It will be different. We won the First World War. We won the Second World War. We won everything before that and in between. And then we decided to change the name. Well, now we have it back to where we all want it. Everybody wanted it. Everybody is so happy to have it back. You will fail and America will win, win, win. The enemy will always fail. 24 years have passed since that Tuesday morning in September, and an entire generation of Americans have come of age in a totally different world. While they cannot remember the agony of that day, they are carrying on the legacy of those who lost. Around 8:30 a.m. on the morning of the attacks, Army Lieutenant Colonel Kip Taylor sent an email to his friends and family describing the joys of fatherhood and his excitement for the upcoming birth of his unborn son. He wrote, after you have kids, there are days that you just get going and you say, "Hi, honey, I'm home." What we do until that moment pales in comparison.
This is all
But
about
just
the
that
9/11
little statement,
responders. But
"Hi,
you'll see
honey."
he'll take his turn here in a minute. Go
So
ahead.
American, so beautiful. But that's really the point of it all, isn't it? An hour after he sent that email, Flight 77 flew into Colonel Taylor's Pentagon office and claimed the life of a very proud father and true patriot. 6 weeks later, on October 25th, 2001, Colonel Taylor's son, Luke, was born. Luke then tragically lost his mom to cancer when he was just 2 years old, leaving him to be raised by his father's brother. As a young boy, Luke asked his uncle about the folded flag on the bookshelf. And when he learned about his dad's decades of devotion to the Army and the horrors of September 11th, that's when he learned. Luke carried that memory with him and joined the ROTC as a college freshman. He graduated just last year, and I'm pleased to say he is with us today as a second lieutenant and doing very well. He's rising quickly in the infantry, preparing for Army Ranger School. The spitting image of his dad, they say, Luke says that every time he puts on a uniform, he feels connected to his father and to our country. But it was a father he never knew. Luke, your parents are together in heaven, and they could not be prouder of the man that they have produced. They produced you. Those two great people produced you. Luke, please stand.
So this is the kind of moment that you often see at these sorts of memorials, and in full uniform, he stands and acknowledges the applause.
You look good, Luke. You look good. They're looking down on you. They're very proud. This morning, we recall the light of America's best and bravest and the love that they showed in their final moments. In their memory, we make a solemn pledge and a noble promise. We will honor always our great heroes. And you are our heroes. There's a group of people that don't want to talk about our heroes, but we will always talk about our heroes. And that's the way our country is, and that's the way the people feel. We will defend the nation they served, the values they upheld, and the freedom for which they died. We will support our troops, we will protect our families, and we will preserve the American way of life for every future generation. We will build taller, grow stronger, fight harder, and soar higher. And together we will go forward as one people with one heart, one faith, one flag, and one glorious destiny under Almighty God. May God bless the memories of those who died and the heroes who fought and the soldiers who still stand watch. May God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you.
I think we picked that up
Thank
late,
you.
but he was there. I thought one reference, and I'll play you another Trump cut in a second. There are people who don't want to remember these heroes. What is that a reference to?
Who?
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to
remember the
remember
9/11 heroes? This is the sort of thing that you hear a lot of from Trump and from the MAGA-sphere. They don't want to recognize the heroes. They don't love America as much as we love America. There's a lot of us versus them. I mean, it's all us versus them with Trump. Where's the other Trump stuff? Here you go. Albert has the next cut from Trump. I don't want you to think it was all 9/11 memorializing. Check this out.
Again, let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt. Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. Our prayers are with his wonderful wife, Eric, and his beautiful children. Fantastic people they are. We miss him greatly, yet I have no doubt that Charlie's voice and the courage he put into the hearts of countless people, especially young people, will live on. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The date of the ceremony will be announced, and I can only guarantee you one thing, that we will have a very big crowd. Very, very big.
Well, the one thing I would say is that this is the disposition of the president toward Charlie Kirk and to memorializing Charlie Kirk. I told you that the remains of Charlie Kirk will accompany J.D. Vance in Air Force Two. Also told you about the flag at half-staff and the continued degrading of this Presidential Medal of Freedom given posthumously to Kirk. And I'll remind you that it was given to Rush Limbaugh, and Limbaugh really was the inspiration for Charlie Kirk. If you know anything about Charlie Kirk, and apparently a lot of people don't, Charlie Kirk was really inspired by Rush Limbaugh. He was a kid when Rush Limbaugh was really popular, and he used to, during his lunch hour, listen to Rush Limbaugh, and he had a very Rush Limbaugh inspired way of connecting. He really had an us versus them, black versus white way of looking at everything. And he was, Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. But again, in the theater of and forum of ideas, there's no room for violence. This should have been, this hate speech, returned with more speech, not weapons and not bullets. Sorry Dude is not my hero. There's plenty of video evidence supporting that he was a bigot and misogynist. Hope we don't elevate him to 9/11 status, says Luis. Thank you for the $5 super chat. And of course, you're right. Here is a bit of a run that I liked from Schmidt on this. I just want to mention, don't you like Schmidt ahead of Jesse Waters? I don't know, I couldn't take Jesse Waters. Jesse Waters went on with kind of this us versus them thing. You know what I mean? He was reflective of okay, this is what you want. They're coming after us. Okay, now isn't that what he was doing, Albert? I think that was
just listing the notable assassination or
this is worth noting, and then I'll let you hear Schmidt. Sorry, let me do this. Let you hear Waters last night, and then listen to how political violence is cherry picked by Waters, the same way that Donald Trump cherry picks it when he talks about political violence, to only talk about political violence against the right, and to leave out all of these leftist and centrist Democratic targets of political violence. What's that, Kim?
It feels like when they cherry pick, they're stirring the pot, right? They're stirring the pot so that we have even more of this.
Go ahead. Here's Jesse Waters from last night.
This hits differently because Charlie was one of us. And Trump gets hit in the ear. Charlie gets shot dead. They came after Kavanaugh with a rifle to his neighborhood. They went after Musk's cars. They just shot 2 Jews outside the embassy. Think about it. Scalise got shot, barely survived. It's happening. We got trans shooters. We got riots in LA. They are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. And what are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate? And that's the question we're just going to have to ask ourselves.
Now, that's, to me, the most incendiary rhetoric that is cherry-picked to establish an us versus them that I've heard. Here are the actual facts for those with conveniently short memories. I think this is out of, maybe Ezra Klein posted this.
It was a different Twitter user I found.
Different Twitter. Here we go. The man who targeted and killed Democratic state lawmaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark in their home in Minnesota was a Trump supporter. The man charged with attempted assassination of Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro in April was a Trump supporter. The man convicted of orchestrating a series of shootings at the homes of 4 Democratic elected officials in New Mexico in 2022 was a Trump supporter. The man who tried to kidnap then Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and assaulted her husband Paul in 2022 was a Trump supporter. The men who wanted to hang Mike Pence on January 6, 2021 were Trump supporters. The man who killed the son of Obama-appointed district judge Esther Salas in 2020 was a Trump supporter. The men who were convicted of trying to kidnap Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020 were Trump supporters. The man who sent pipe bombs to the homes of Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, and other top Democrats in 2018 was a Trump supporter. The man who killed left-wing activist Heather Heyer after driving his car into a crowd of counter-protesters in Charlottesville in 2017 was a Trump supporter. Don't tell me about the attacks on the right and completely leave out the attacks on the left. Don't say, oh, they wanted this. They count on those who are making these arguments. They count on the short memory that you have. Oh, everybody's about Charlie Kirk. It must be, yeah, left-wing violence. It's ruling America. No. The proliferation of guns is everywhere. And the violence, the preponderance of it is coming from the right. Again, I decry it all, left or right. But these arguments that are being made in this moment are scary. Political violence only begets more political violence. Violence only begets more violence. You can apply it to the Middle East instead of looking just at America. But there's no question that this is true. What is on screen now? Despicable. The USA president is stoking tensions instead of calling for calm. This is Lakumeka. Play me a little bit of Schmidt today. I thought he was particular. I didn't see all of it. It got a glance, but I like Schmidt. I mean, it's weird. He was a old school conservative, but let's leave aside his background. I thought this was pretty good. Go for it, Albert.
Must be condemned unequivocally. Jeff Bezos says democracy dies in darkness. Dies with a gunshot at high noon on a Utah community college campus. It dies when a president of the United States says in broad daylight that our cornerstones in our society have no meaning and only if he wins the election, is it legitimate? MAGA is a violent political philosophy because MAGA is fascism. There are many people who say when they see violence in America that this isn't America. Well, they don't know their country because we live in one of the most violent societies on earth. And the political violence we're seeing is a result of something that Matthew Dowd was fired for on MSNBC for telling the truth. Hateful rhetoric follows hateful thoughts and is the preface to violence. Saying that on MSNBC got Matthew Dowd fired. Now, isn't that the curriculum of the Holocaust Museum? Hateful thoughts becoming hateful words becomes hateful actions. Let me show you something. This magazine,
Life magazine he's holding up,
is from November of 1938. And the toddler on it celebrates the second anniversary of Life magazine, which was booming. And it's an interesting magazine cover because you can see from behind me what was happening in the world in 1938 by the images on those magazine covers. But for that edition, the editors at Life looked around and said the most important thing for the Life reader is to celebrate the second anniversary of the creation of the magazine. But inside this magazine are the first pictures of the Kristallnacht, the revenge that the Germans take against the Jews, who they blame for the assassination of a German official, a Nazi, in Paris. And the rage that breaks loose, incited by Goebbels, incited by Hitler, smashes thousands of Jewish-owned stores, and great violence is unleashed, the event that predicates the Holocaust. In the magazine, the next story has a picture of Hitler and Goering at Goering's niece's christening. Now, the reality is, in the aftermath of a murderous ideology built on a foundation of violence, used an act of violence as a pretext to commit more violence. I will not get on my knees and capitulate to things that I know are not true. January 6th was a violent coup, and it was incited by the man who is responsible for inciting political violence in America on a 10-year basis, and that man is Donald Trump, period. The death of Charlie Kirk is a tragedy. It was murder, and it happened in front of his children. But Charlie Kirk, in life, was a political extremist and an agitator who profited from division, not inspiration. His ministry was a cancerous one, and it was aimed at killing the American Republic. Charlie Kirk deserved to be debated and condemned, not shot. And Charlie Kirk was 31. Maybe Charlie Kirk, at a 40-year-old man, would have abandoned the dark path he was on. But the chance of that was stolen from him, from us, from all of us. But Charlie Kirk did not serve his country. Charlie Kirk did not serve the American flag, and it is inappropriate for it to be lowered to half-staff above the White House. It's a violation of protocol and meaning. Charlie Kirk served the MAGA flag. He was a political partisan. And we should all appreciate the deep sickness inside of MAGA that says we lower the flag above the White House for Charlie Kirk, but not for Senator Melissa Hortman. Donald Trump, over and over again, has incited violence. And when an 80-year-old man was attacked by a hammer because he was married to the Speaker of the House, MAGA lit up with jokes and celebration, and Charlie Kirk said, a good patriot, they would bail that attacker out.
Okay,
Do not let anybody
this
tell
is
you.
really the point, that there is a double standard, a hypocrisy, and also a clear stirring of the violent pot that comes out of the right. And the reason I wanted you to hear the first part, which relates to Kristallnacht, et cetera, is that I think this is an inflection moment, potentially, and it's scary. This kind of political violence is, as I say, it only begets more violence. And so for that reason, I feel as though this is the point at which we need to gather ourselves and have some sanity prevail. And sadly, from the top, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, which in itself is this outgrowth and perversion of American ideals, he is stirring the pot, as I say. He's fanning these flames. He's blaming the left, as he does in every way. He has for as long as he's been running. He blames the media, anything that's unfriendly to him. He calls it fake news. He called the media repeatedly enemies of the people. So you see the way in which the othering of people can, and an ideology, or even just a simple political identity, can be turned into violence. I think this is deeply concerning, you know. Chaplain Fred with a $100 super chat. Wow, that is super generous, first of all. And let me get to the chat. Hi, Mark, Kim, Albert, and Tony. We are one step away from civil war, I think, like Jesse Waters has been saying all along, as well as other Trump minions. Let's not forget, Kirk said he was fine if a percentage was to be killed every year in order to keep our rights to bear arms. Yeah, that, again, was part of the tragic irony around Charlie Kirk, that somehow those who are lost to gun violence, those sweet souls lost to gun violence, are worth it in order for all of us to be able to carry guns and have full gun rights. But I agree with Chaplain Fred. I mean, I just said it before this even appeared on screen. This is an inflection moment. Thank you again, Chaplain Fred. Really generous with the $100 super chat. And I think your point is an important one, an extremely important one. So the weaponization of this is something that's already being done by the top down. And we all know from top down comes all the GOP like tin soldiers walking in lockstep with their leader. On the Kristallnacht, was Kristallnacht before or after the Night of the Long Knives? Night of Long Knives was before Kristallnacht by a few years. But the Night of Long Knives was there were political assassinations going on there in Germany. They say it's wrong to speak bad of those gone from the world, so how do we speak of such a person, says the Lady Beatrice. Well, I'll tell you, let me help you with that, because I think the loss of Charlie Kirk for his family, for his young children, is a tragedy. I mean, the loss of his life is a tragedy. I'm not cheering Charlie Kirk being assassinated or being shot and killed, being murdered. It's just not something to cheer about. As I say, even if you accept this, he was a horrifyingly dangerous figure with this toxic verbiage, racist, misogynist. I mean, he was whipping up a base to hate on the left, on the Democrats. But all that said, his murder can only beget more violence. So even if you don't want to say anything or accept anything about Charlie Kirk, which I completely understand. I mean, you don't want to embrace him in any way. You still have to understand how his larger-than-life figure is represented by a bunch of people who are legitimately moved by his murder, and many of them feel like that's the need to bear arms, the need to take up arms. And I'd love to see them rhetorically join a conversation about issues, but that's not what many of them are about. So it's scary. It makes the political environment in America and the political discourse much more dangerous for everybody. Trevor Starr in Hollywood says, when a despicable person dies, it can be hard to be sad. But what happened to Charlie Kirk was horrific, in capital letters. The assassin should be captured so he can rot in prison for the rest of his long and miserable life. Yeah, and there, Trevor Starr in Hollywood, thank you for the super chat, the $10 super chat. And the truth is that Trevor's right about this. Right? I mean, he's right to both acknowledge the horrifying nature of the rhetoric that Charlie Kirk produced, these extreme positions that Charlie Kirk maintained, the complete MAGAnization of Charlie Kirk. I mean, Charlie Kirk wasn't MAGA from the start. He morphed into MAGA when he was taken into the Trump camp. And then he became the best ambassador for MAGA that they had. It's no wonder Trump wants the flags at half staff. I'm sure he wants full military honors. Who knows what? I mean, there's been a complete degrading of all of that in Washington. He'll get the the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously, etc. But more than anything, you can't whitewash who Charlie Kirk was, as we said at the beginning of this show. But this moment in time is a dangerous one and not a good one, and no one should cheer the murder of this guy. Trump is making life more dangerous for all of us, says Gary Russell. That's true in so many ways. And all I can say is that I feel as though this audience sees it clearly. The Lady Beatrice from the $5 super chat says, according to one NPR article, he even showed his misogyny when he blamed the shift of liberal views on being unmarried. Is that it?
Taylor Swift.
Taylor's shift, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I see, yeah. I mean, there's this whole, look, this is a Christo-fascist thing that we talk about from time to time on this show. The rise of a kind of conservatism that has a religiosity associated with it, right? I mean, it's obedience to your husband. It's obedience to the Lord. There's a lot of this. I'm telling you, it's the religious obedience that is pledged and sort of understood and constantly repeated. That obedience is half a click off from obedience to Mr. President, obedience to Donald Trump, obedience to an ideology. So
he was looking at the things he said. He believed that women, really our point was to have babies and be married, and that we had all been lied to by society. And that's why we're confused, and single women are upset and angry at the world, because really we're all just missing our point in life, which is to be little baby makers. Listen, I have babies. That's great. But that's not for everyone.
Well, I mean, he's basically saying, and you should stay with the babies, and you shouldn't be doing the show with Mark Thompson or working at KCBS Radio or KGO Radio, or whatever the hell you want to work. You shouldn't be working at all. Your work is with family. You've drifted.
I guess I'm awful.
Questioning black pilots' qualifications in January of 2024, he said that when he sees a black pilot, he'll think, boy, I hope he's qualified. Calling George Floyd a scumbag during the October 2021 Exposing Critical Racism tour. He criticized Martin Luther King, referred to him as awful, not a good person, said the civil rights movement was a, quote, huge mistake. He called King a, quote, very flawed one, and complained about what he sees as a mythological anti-racist creation. Opposing the concept of white privilege, critical race theory, of course. He said that white privilege is a myth. He was a public critic of critical race theory on college campuses, argued for pushing back against what he sees as race-based or identity-based curricula. Of course, an obvious opponent of DEI and those programs, very tough on immigrants. He claimed that Democratic immigration policies aim to reduce the white demographic share in America. He also used the Great Replacement framing, a controversial idea, associated with racism and also anti-immigration. He's given speeches about what he considers racist theories on America's college campuses, including rejecting many mainstream narratives about systemic racism, I should say. Critics say he stokes outrage by doing that, of course. I mean, in all these ways and others, Charlie Kirk was a toxic figure on the American political scene. He was also an incredibly significant figure on the American political scene. And his death and his murder is all bad. It's all bad. Trump was alive during Robert Kennedy's assassination, Vilma says. Thank you for the $10 super chat. She says Trump was alive during Robert Kennedy's assassination, JFK's assassination, and MLK's assassination as a Democrat. Now, Donald Trump is a Republican. Now, Donald Trump knows how to take political advantage. Yeah. And finally, Luis says, with a $5 super chat, gang, get ready for Trump's marketing of this event. Kirk Trump Bibles, T-shirts, maybe signed blood-drenched strips of Kirk's death shirt. Monetize everything. I mean, that's really grim and gross.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening, but I do see, as we've said, I do see a celebration of Kirk's life that is fair in a personal sense, as I say. I really do mourn for his kids, particularly, and his wife. But you can pervert that mourning into lionizing this man and ignoring so much of the reality of the toxic nature of his rhetoric and the hate-filled nature of his rhetoric. But I'm going to say this in relation to Charlie Kirk. He went on to the college campuses. He welcomed debate. He wanted debate. In fact, his event, and then I'll get to David Katz, his event at which he was murdered had a component where people stand up in the audience and they do a back and forth. It's called Prove Me Wrong. He did it at a bunch of different college campuses and a bunch of different rallies. And so that question about firearms and about the trans movement, which was being asked at the moment that he was responding and he was murdered, that was part of the Prove Me Wrong back and forth. So I'll give him this. He welcomed opposing opinions. He was a powerful political figure, as I say. I think more powerful for the way in which he marshaled and ramped up support for MAGA philosophies and Donald Trump, more powerful than Joe Rogan, just to put it in a context that you perhaps are aware of because of Rogan's notoriety. But, all right, I've got David Katz coming up. Smash the like button if you would.
With your iron rod.
Kim, you had something?
Oh, before we get to David Katz, a quick mention. There's a $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the killer in the Charlie Kirk case. And I thought that was interesting how much energy and money is being devoted to that, but we're not hearing much about another shooting that happened yesterday in Colorado, the school shooting where 2 high school students were shot, or 2 people at the campus in Colorado, Evergreen High School, were shot. The shooter died. The kids are in the hospital, reportedly in critical condition. It's indicative.
The shooter died of a self-inflicted gun wound, I think.
Indicative of how much importance we're placing on someone like Charlie Kirk, but we're not caring about the kids of America, right?
We become inured to this stuff going on college, on college campuses and in elementary schools and high schools. We've become completely accustomed to it. It's horrible, but it's part of this proliferation of guns that Kirk was such a tremendous advocate for. He wanted absolutely no controls on gun ownership,
and
he's pretty well got it in America.
The other mention is you talked about all the racism that Kirk spewed over time. And today we have potential threats that are triggering lockdowns at the HBCUs across the South because bomb threats are coming into these historically black colleges and universities on the heels of that Kirk shooting. So it's just a snapshot of what's happening in America.
And I guess I'll just mention this, that in the nation's capital, there's alert to Senate staff. The Capitol Police said they were responding to an incident at the DNC, the Democratic headquarters. Staff being asked to remain clear of police activity. The bomb threat that was issued found not to be credible, but that, again, is just part of the disruption that is, again, I'd say, quite relevant to what we saw yesterday with the murder of Charlie Kirk. How Did I Get Here said he frequently, Kirk did, interrupted those who questioned him, though. He never let people get their point across. You know, How Did I Get Here is not wrong. If you watch again, I was going to, and then I'll get to David Katz, I promise, but just in the last 30 seconds, if you watch Kirk's back and forths during those Prove Me Wrong sessions that he was doing at these college campuses and at different rallies, it was an extremely aggressive style, you know. And so you could say that, you know, Mark, you can tell me about how he, you know, welcomed the back and forth, but it was really all forth and no back. So perhaps a fair point. Anyway. All right. Smash the like button and we continue.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yes. Oh, by the way, this is the Born to Peacefully Resist t-shirt. You can get it along with other Born to Peacefully Resist and Make Love Not Fascism. I think we have a few of them at getmarkmerch.com. And I think also under all our YouTube videos, there are click-throughs on that. Just like under all our YouTube videos are click-throughs to Patreon and PayPal, and you can support the show that way. But we have this sort of special line of t-shirts that welcome peaceful resistance on both sides. And to the extent that you're comfortable and you want to support the show, that's a great way to do it. I'll share a pic yesterday. I got a really great email, which was relevant to that and also to another love that we have on the show. And I'll share that with you tomorrow. And right now, we'll get on to one of my favorite conversations every week. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
It is with great pleasure that we welcome in one of the great legal analysts across the English-speaking world. You can hear him on London radio and hear him on, radio and see him on television across America, New Zealand, Australia. And he regularly is a pundit on News Nation and on Fox News Channel. How about the former special prosecutor, now a defense attorney, the great David Katz?
Great to be with you, Mark.
Hello, sir. David, much going on in America these days. We'll leave aside for a moment kind of the roiling violence that I think accompanies a lot of the shadow of the murder of a political activist in Charlie Kirk. And I want to turn to the law a bit and a coming agenda that has been expressly picked up by the Supreme Court. And I guess they're going to fast track it. And that's related to the Trump tariffs, which are having a dramatic effect that we're only beginning to see on the American economy. Can you give us a state of the state on SCOTUS?
Sure. Well, I predicted on News Nation and on your show, Mark, that the appellate ruling striking down Trump's tariffs will be upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. I know that I'm putting my neck on the line, sticking my neck out a little bit, given what you call the concierge Trump Supreme Court. But it just seems to me that this is so it's just not fettered to anything. There is not an emergency. Trump's argument was that there was an emergency in two ways, and therefore he could use this emergency power that gave him the right to set tariffs in an emergency. Everyone agrees that it's the right of Congress to set tariffs, to debate them, and then with the president's approval, like any other bill, approve the tariffs country by country, product by product. The reason that he has this extraordinary power is supposedly in extraordinary times, and the extraordinary emergent circumstances were non-emergencies. One, that we have a lot of drugs brought into the country. Ironically, we've actually had less, according to statistics, less fentanyl and less drugs actually brought into the country within the last year. It's still a very dangerous, unacceptable amount, but it's gone on for decades. It's not an emergency. As I say, it's actually even going down at this time. And the other one is that we have a trade imbalance. And of course, we've had a trade imbalance for a very long time, again, for decades. So I think that the Supreme Court will see through this. I think since they wouldn't stop the collection of the taxes, either the appellate court or the U.S. Supreme Court, in their emergency docket, they wouldn't stop the collection of the tariffs. I think it made sense that the Supreme Court expedited the case because they need to stop this collection of tariffs pretty quickly, because it is going to be an administrative nightmare to return all that money. Having said that, you can't create a nightmare by your incompetence and aggregation of power that you don't have, and say, oh, well, now that I've arrogated power, now that I've made a huge mess, court, look at this terrible situation I've gotten myself into. As courts often say to you, as authorities often say to you, your lack of caution isn't my emergency. Your lack of preparation and the mess you made isn't my emergency or my problem. So I really think that this one, I think he has about, there's the two votes, of Thomas and Alito, unfortunately, because I think Alito has a fine mind. I don't think that of Thomas, but I think the two of them are just calling it in. You can guess how they're going to rule on everything.
Right, fine mind or not.
They've got their idea that they're going to do whatever Trump wants to do. Somehow they just see that their position, which is actually so incredibly important on the U.S. Supreme Court, is just a rubber stamp, and they're just phoning it in. But I think the other seven, I think all seven may say that these tariffs are too far. And then, Congress will get together. They'll negotiate with these countries, through the trade representative. But when it all ends up, Congress, I think, will set these tariffs. I think it'll be better for the economy. And I just don't think the Supreme Court, Mark, will allow that power, because if they allow that power, and I don't think there's any way to circumscribe it, every president will have an emergency. You will never find any president who doesn't have an emergency, who can't set tariffs. And then, you see the way it's being used right now. No reason to think it wouldn't be used in the future. Trump isn't the only corrupt person who's ever going to come into the White House. So basically, you control foreign policy because you can just hobble the economy of just about any country in the world, and you can also shake them down. And that's not what it's all about. And you can say, well, Congress could shake them down too. But think about it. You have to get so many people to concur. The problem with dictatorships, the problem with authoritarianism, you only have to really convince one person. And one person is a lot more likely to take a bribe, as we're seeing right now, than an entire Congress. Yes, they're lobbyists. There's all kinds of things like that, Mark. So I think this one's going in a good direction. And they're hearing it in November. And I think they're going to decide probably in December. And they'll stop the tariffs between now and the end of the year. They'll stop the tariffs from being collected, and some economic sense and rule of law will return to this area.
Well, as noted before, you'll then have to establish credits or some way to return tariff money that was collected illegally.
People are keeping very careful books. There's billions of dollars involved, and they know exactly what they're owed, and had the tariffs not been imposed. Yes, you're going to have to do it through credits and things like that, Mark. And a lot of small businesses are gone already, or will be gone by December, when the Supreme Court, I think, issues the decision. I think in November, when you hear the oral argument, it'll be quite clear what.
You said if they well, it's interesting. You'd said that if they stop tariff collection, you'll know that they're likely leaning against.
And they can issue that stay. They can issue that stay at any point. The briefs are due in less than a week. They may take a look at the briefs and just think that the arguments by Trump are so hollow. I mean, they just really are hollow.
Yeah, but they're hollow, David. But I'll take you to another hollow argument in a second. I just say that, but when they begin to indicate, as you sort of suggested, by issuing a stay, meaning stopping the tariff collection, the kind of heat they're going to take from MAGA Nation, led by Trump, is going to be immense. I don't know that they want to take that on.
Well, first of all, the U.S. Supreme Court will take on the heat. I have a very different view of the U.S. Supreme Court than I think a lot of the commentators that I hear. And I guess it's, 35 years as an attorney, having seen the Supreme Court in action when I was a young lawyer, actually sat in the U.S. Supreme Court, courtroom, and followed their decisions, avidly all of these years. I think that they are pretty much governed by the rule of law. I do think this is one of the worst Supreme Courts that we've seen in decades. I think it's such a pity that RBG didn't step aside. It's just such an anomaly that we ended up with a 6-3 court and not a 5-4 court where, first Kennedy was the deciding vote. Whatever Kennedy voted was the way they went. And then whatever way Roberts went when you still had RBG was the way. And now with the 6-3, yes, there have been things like presidential immunity. There have been things like Dobbs, where, they really didn't have Chief Justice Roberts' votes on Dobbs. Dobbs was going to allow like 16 weeks, what's 16 weeks? What's 18 weeks? Let Mississippi's 16 weeks be imposed. He was not going to overrule Roe v. Wade. That was the vote. That was having RBG gone and having Amy Coney Barrett. No one should forget, she is the author. That whole sequence of events is why Roe v. Wade was overturned, and we have Dobbs. It was not Chief Justice Roberts. It was Amy. What did they say? I never knew till now it was you, Barzani. Remember The Godfather? I never knew till now it was Barzani all along. It was Amy Coney Barrett, female justice, all along, who destroyed Roe v. Wade and gave us Dobbs.
You talk about adherence to the law, and I see just the opposite. I think the court that you sat in on and were so excited to be part of, the justice system that was certainly informed by certain political philosophies, but also an adherence to the law, a loyalty to the law, to the word, that court doesn't exist anymore, David Katz. I'd suggest to you, and again, I'm an outsider. That's why we're talking to you. You're a real guy. You work for the federal government. You were a prosecutor, et cetera, on the part of the federal government. You've worked in Republican administrations, et cetera. So please, I humbly would suggest to you that this crew has an allegiance to a political philosophy more than they have a legal philosophy.
Well, like you take the tariff decision and you think, okay, what's the world going to be like if they rule, let's say 5-4 or 6-3 to uphold Trump's tariffs? And what's the limit to it? He's not going to be in office forever. And then whoever the successor is, the Supreme Court will think this through. That after 3 years of letting Trump have his way, for people who think, well, all they want to do up there, those Republicans, is let Trump have his way, all the Republicans on the Supreme Court. I just don't think they want to let Trump have his way and then have 100 years of terrible history to
David,
follow.
They gave him immunity. They gave him total immunity.
Mark will have 100 years. That was the worst of them. And of course, there was Citizens United, which was Chief Justice Roberts. That was you, Chief Justice Roberts. Citizens United was you.
Allowing corporate money in as speech to American elections. But David, let me just get then to the next thing, and you can tell me about how they're, I'm sorry, but they ruled, and as a shadow docket ruling, wasn't it, on the detaining of all of these immigrants by, and I use it in quotes, immigrants. I mean, again, they're detaining people, and they establish after the fact, after they detain them, whether or not they're immigrants, whether they're here legally. These are crazy dragnets that are established, and they're just throwing these people into vans. And SCOTUS is saying, the Supreme Court of the United States, backing up this strategy, saying it's okay to grab people out of a Home Depot parking lot, grab them if they're speaking Spanish. So you can tell me about how they're informed by some sort of loyalty to the law, but this appears to me, from the outside looking in, again, as though this is a fealty to a political philosophy and to Donald Trump.
Well, first of all, I'm taking a Katsadamas on the tariffs decision. I feel that strongly. You can play this back to me in November or December when they uphold this supposed emergency and allow emergency tariffs to be set like this by every president for the end of time until somebody overrules their precedent. So I'm taking
So to review, Katsadamas is saying the tariffs will be overruled, they'll be deemed illegal, and the tariffs will be turned back. That's an official Katsadamas prediction. Now, take me to the immigration ruling, which was a shadow docket ruling.
I don't know if people saw Justice Sotomayor on the Colbert Show. If they did, it was really fascinating because he wanted to have a very different kind of conversation with her. It was his timing was great. It was the night after this decision came out, And I strongly disagree with this decision. I think this allows roving patrols. It allows them to stop people on the basis of their ethnicity. That's an awful thing in America. They said, well, if you're actually a citizen or you're here legally, it's no big intrusion. That's easy for Kavanaugh to say. Kavanaugh's not having any intrusions like that. But we've seen what kind of intrusion ICE has with these people that they supposedly briefly detain. They throw them to the ground, they handcuff them, they hurt them, they humiliate them in all kinds of ways. They keep them for longer periods of time than Kavanaugh seems to think in his concurring opinion. There's no real evidentiary basis, as I understand it, for what the majority is saying in this emergency docket. But I want to make my attempt to do what Sotomayor tried to do. I don't think it worked very well on the Colbert show. And can I just talk about the shadow docket for 1 minute? It's a great expression to make it look nefarious. And they are using it much, much more, Mark. And there are reasons why it has looked kind of nefarious. But the idea of the
is one of them that it is nefarious. One of those reasons.
I don't think that I don't think it has to be nefarious. As I recall, there was a judge in Amarillo, Texas, when Biden was still president, who knocked out this mifepristone, the medical abortion pill, nationwide. He purported to issue a nationwide injunction. And I think the Fifth Circuit down there in the South was actually going to affirm that. And the U.S. Supreme Court, in a shadow docket, said, no, no, no. And they didn't sign it. They didn't name names. They just stopped that injunction from going into effect, which allowed women all over the country to continue to get the medical abortion pill. So that's why I say the shadow docket doesn't have to be nefarious. But of course, it's been greatly overused with Trump. And it is frustrating, as Sotomayor pointed out, not to have a stated reason. Let me just tell you the other side of it.
Well, hang on a second. Just make that clear. When there's a shadow docket judgment, there need be no argument offered, no explanation. It's just a judgment offered.
Right, but they get the mifepristone ruling by some district judge, even though it's affirmed by the circuit court, okay? And it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court almost always says, no, this is some injunction somewhere. But look how egregious this one was. Look how anomalous this one was. You were going to tell women, not just in all the red states, but all the blue states, that they couldn't have this drug. You were going to stop the FDA approvals. And you could see just from the petition that was being filed by the doctors and the women who wanted to get mifepristone, that this ruling, besides being too broad, too nationwide, not proper under the law, the FDA had not botched this up. The U.S. Supreme Court could see, you see, Mark, just from the briefs that were being filed. Then they asked for a speedy opposition. They read the speedy opposition brief that comes in from the other side, which I guess was whatever a religious group had tried to knock out mifepristone for women all over the country. And having read those briefs, the U.S. Supreme Court said, look, we don't want to have a huge decision over this. We don't even need to have an oral argument over this. But from reading the briefs, they did what I thought was the right thing in a shadow docket. That's an example of where a shadow docket emergency ruling, not signed by anybody, not with an oral argument, not with a big hoop-de-doo over it, stops something really bad from happening. They stop something from going into effect. Now, I don't feel the same way about the one with the roving patrols and the stopping people on their ethnic basis. Now, what they would say, Mark, the people who are for that ruling, they would say it wasn't just ethnicity, being brown, working while brown. It wasn't just speaking Spanish. And they have statistics on how many families in America actually speak Spanish. People would be surprised how many there are, not just in California, but in other states too. And also working these low-wage jobs, which if you give the devil all that they're due, if you want to give the six all that they're due, apparently they don't go to hospitals and places like that, where a lot of people actually who are illegally in the country or who are here under various, various programs, where they might find them. They do go to places like the Office Depot. They go to places like construction sites. And the argument is, by Trump, that and ICE and Homan and all those people I disagree with on everything philosophically and politically, is that when you add all those three things together, being brown, they admit that being brown, and they keep saying, well, being brown alone is not enough, but they say, well, being brown, speaking Spanish, and working at one of these low-wage places, is for the purpose of not allowing the stay to remain in effect, because that's what they did. They say they didn't rule on the merits, Mark. They said they just took the stay off. Of course, that has a huge impact, because of what it means is that ICE, which was chilled, ICE was not doing these roving patrols. They were not harassing and throwing to the ground and detaining all of those people because they knew they were going to get hit with contempt by that district court judge. Now they're not worried about contempt. Now what they were doing before, they're able to do again because the stay is not in effect. But the U.S. Supreme Court
the
would
stay
say,
again is the stoppage of these. The judge says
of her
you have
order
to
from
stop.
going into effect.
Right, right. So that was the order against ICE in L.A. That was the point.
Right, and so this
the
was
Supreme
very,
Court has
very
overruled
important.
has lifted that stay. Go ahead.
And then you get into this whole thing about being precedential, which I think they took a crack at Colbert and Sotomayor, and it's just like he was trying to be funny. And, you know, from Sotomayor's point of view, okay, look at it from her point of view. She wants to try to get 2 more votes on a lot of cases. She doesn't want to sit up there and be polemic. She doesn't want to blast Amy Coney Barrett or Chief Justice Roberts. She's thinking, and she's very smart, she's thinking, I'm going to want their 2 votes. I'm going to want to get to 5 on a lot of questions. I'm not going to sit here on Colbert's show and get some cheap laughs and alienate them. So that's why, as for what Colbert was trying to do, was kind of a dud. I think if she were on your show, it'd be kind of a dud, because you're doing a very intelligent but also entertaining show, and it really sort of wasn't all that entertaining. But that was the point.
Sure, it's a serious
issue
issue at stake here. I get where she's coming from. I didn't see the Colbert thing, so go ahead.
So she was, her dissent was fiery. And then her conversation about it wasn't fiery, because she knows that Chief Justice Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett are watching that, and she doesn't want to alienate them, and with good reason. So I guess my final thoughts on that ruling was that they are indeed precedential. People say, well, they're not really precedents. The reason that these judges up in New England got blasted by Gorsuch the other day, that they're not following precedent, is if you were the judge, let's say right now in San Francisco or in Washington State, and ICE came and did these same roving patrols on the same basis, you couldn't say that this shadow docket ruling, right, 6-3, was not precedent, Mark. It is precedent. It's certainly because they're making a prediction on the merits. They're not deciding the merits, but they're making a prediction that is legal conduct. So given that is legal, you can't read that decision. As much as I disagree with it, if I were a district judge sitting in Seattle or in San Francisco and they were doing the same thing in my district, I think I would have to go not the way that Judge Frimpong went down here, but I would go the other way on those 3 things. So it is a precedent. So in that sense, it's troubling that you have this shadow docket. But on this particular one, this one's going the same way. I'll make a Catsadamus on this one too. The merits of this thing is going the same way as the stay. The U.S. Supreme Court, as currently constituted, will vote 6-3 that they can do these roving patrols, and they can base it on you're being brown, conversation occurring in Spanish, and you're being at a low-wage job place.
In other words, they're going to underscore what they did in the shadow docket. They're going to say, hey, it's okay. ICE, you're okay with the plan you have. Right?
Yes.
That's what you're saying. Okay.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. I wanted to just, there's some heartbreaking stories, and one of them, I say one of them, one group of them comes from these people who are in a temporary protected status. I was reading the story of this guy out of, he's a Stanford nurse. He's been here since he was 3 years old, David Katz. And now the administration just announcing that the temporary status for Honduras and Nicaragua has been, these protections are going to expire. They really have expired. I think September 7th was the expiration date. And there are, we're talking about 52,000 Hondurans and 7,000 Nepalis and 1,000 Nicaraguans. And this is a real problem for them. I mean, their protected status being lifted. And again, this guy, he came here when he was 3 years old, and now he's a nurse, a cardiac nurse at Stanford. He may be deported. In fact, will be deported. So this is a case that is, being handled in the Bay Area. Is it Trina Thompson, the judge in San Francisco's district court, has the next hearing set for November, and this temporary protected status may or may not be reestablished, they note here. If the court sides with the Trump administration, it is possible for the national temporary protective status alliance to appeal to the Supreme Court. So that's just a snapshot of what you're dealing with. And I just wondered if you can speak to, again, within this overall immigration question, there are a number of these different immigrants from different countries that have different status. This is this TPS, temporary protected status, that will be very much affected by a court decision in San Francisco and then ultimately possibly the Supreme Court.
Well, these cases are heartbreaking. The individual circumstances are just very touching. And we were going to try to solve this problem with the dreamers. This fellow who came here when he was 3 is a classic dreamer. And just to toot my own horn for 1 minute, I actually represented the first dreamer. The LA Times on the front page talked about Tony's American dream. And my client was Tony Alvarado, and they started to use that expression, the dreamers, the American dream. And Ali Mayorkas was the U.S. attorney at that time. He went on to be the head of DHS. And he gave my client his office, but him too, because he held a bunch of media events about it. He gave him a misdemeanor.
What a great righteous legal battle. Good for you.
Yeah, and he gave him a misdemeanor, and he never got deported from the United States. He'd been deported once, and he came back because he was a classic dreamer. He didn't know much Spanish. He never lived since he was 6 months or a year old there, and they wanted him to be an informant, and he was not interested in being an informant. He worked with the gangs, but in a good way, to help them rehabilitate themselves, and he would have lost all credibility agreeing to be an informant. So the feds kept telling him, you're a very slow learner. And when he kept not agreeing to be an informant, first they sent him down to Mexico, and then his wife and his kids were here, so he came back. And then they told him, they found him at the job like a year later. They said, you're really, really a slow learner. So at that point, they prosecuted him for being an illegal alien found in the United States. So Tony was the first dreamer, and they were going to do something for the dreamers, but the dreamers were so popular that the Democrats thought they could tie the dreamers to a comprehensive immigration package, and then the Republicans just wouldn't bite. Year after year, they wouldn't bite. And so here we are. We've never really solved the DACA, the dreamers problem. And so you have some of these dreamers who now, after being here 35 years and not knowing Spanish and not knowing anything about the countries that they would be deported to, facing deportation. The other thing we've done for generations, Mark, and I think this still is a thing, is your Congress member brings a private immigration bill to keep you personally in the United States. And there used to be dozens and dozens of those bills. And the fellow at Stanford, we need him as a cardiac nurse. We need him not deported from the United States. And I have to believe that some Congress member will carry his and many of these other cases. But it's a tragedy. And there's 2 other countries, too, in Central America. It's not just the Hondurans. It's also the Salvadoreños, the people from El Salvador. And there's
Nicaraguans.
Yes, and the Nicaraguans down there. And there are tens and tens of thousands of people, and they're all facing D-Day, either now or very soon. And it's just an absolute tragedy, Mark. The thing is that the people come here, like the people came from Nicaragua after a hurricane down there. And then the idea is that it's a humanitarian thing. And once the hurricane damage is over and so forth, people can go back. And, in human nature and political events, when is the right moment to ever say now this, cohort of thousands of people has to go back to their country? So the can gets kicked down the road, and I'm for it. I'm for it. But some people are against it. These people came here temporarily. We did them a big favor, and now they ought to go back where they came from. That's the other side of the argument. And nobody really was willing to stop kicking the can down the road until Trump came along. And Trump said, no, they're all going back. Haiti, these Central American countries, these other people, they're all going back. And there's not really anyone on the MAGA side to fight for them. And their own countries don't have a lot of, this guy down in El Salvador, he wants to be the world's coolest dictator. Why doesn't he do something like help his own people stay in America? Right? That doesn't seem to be his agenda.
He's more concerned with extracting money from Trump and a Trump alliance than
his agenda. Right, Mark. His agenda is not helping his own people. But what a thing that would help his own people, to help the Salvadorian people who are well established here stay here. I'll say one last thing. Some of those people just fell between the cracks. People are going to probably wonder, well, how can you be here for 20, 25 years? But, they didn't happen to marry an American at a time when that would help you get papers. They had, the ones that I read about, it's like the daughter got the parents' legal status, but now this is the brother of the daughter who got her parents' legal status, but the daughter couldn't get the brother legal status. You can get your parents' legal status. Maybe the parents can get the child legal status. A lot of them seem to be relatives in these intact families that are living here in America, that are established here in America, but the one person is the one kind of left out. And meanwhile, they have these wonderful jobs and are being very productive in our society.
Yeah, they're intact, productive families. And Luis says, Dear Professor Katz, I'm a fellow proud Cal alum, U.S. born, but speak Spanish with my family. If I get tossed to the ground by ICE while at Home Depot, can I sue?
Yes, and in fact, Kavanaugh went out of his way to say if you're treated roughly or abused by the ICE officers, you have all the right in the world to bring your civil rights case. But, you know, they're in masks. They don't show the number that they have, and they're going to come back and say, you know, that there's no grounds for your suit. They're going to fight you tooth and nail in court if you think the government's going to help you win in the most egregious civil rights violation, especially this regime that's in there now. They're going to fight you tooth and nail. So, you know, have a video, try to get something. If this happens to anybody, you know, try to see the number, like, you know, a number that might identify, because, you know, it just looks like another masked thug who's beating you up, you know, who's throwing you to the ground. You know, the irony is they had this case in the U.S. Attorney's Office where this bystander is wanting to videotape the events with, I think it was a sheriff or police officer out in Victorville, out in somewhere like that. That's all she's doing. She's videotaping the event go down. The cop takes huge offense. God forbid. She should be exercising her constitutional right to videotape an officer of the law in the performance of his duty, throws her to the ground, handcuffs her, beats her up. She gets found guilty during the Biden administration of a felon. He gets convicted of a felony civil rights violation against her, beating her, throwing her to the ground, hurting her. It's in front of a Republican appointed judge. The judge says there's no misconduct there's no impropriety in the case. There's no reason to throw this verdict out. The new U.S. attorney, this is Asalyi, the one who was temporary, now he's acting. There's a whole issue about him right now with a Hawaii judge who's taking a look at whether he should be recused from every case in my old office, the U.S. Attorney's Office here. Asalyi decides that he wants to give this cop a break, even though he's been found guilty of a felony. He sends one of his assistant U.S. attorneys, a fellow named Rob Keenan. This Rob Keenan files a brief saying that this should be reduced to a misdemeanor. It's reduced to a misdemeanor. The judge doesn't really want to do that, but it gets reduced to a misdemeanor. He's given a stay of surrender for when he has to surrender to start serving the small amount of time that the judge gave him, now that it's been reduced to a misdemeanor. And before the day that he actually has to go in, this new U.S. Attorney's Office, this Bill Asalyi and his assistant, Rob Keenan, they dismissed the case entirely.
Wow. What a miscarriage of justice that is. Just crazy.
That's been on the front page of the LA Times. That's not something that I'm portraying as a big story. It's a big story down there on the front page of the LA Times all the time. But, you know, the problem that is the same thing as the Adams case, when they dismissed the case against Mayor Adams entirely with prejudice. Judges don't prosecute cases. If prosecutors don't want to prosecute, that can be a political decision. If you don't like it, vote for the other party in the next election. If you don't like what Trump's done with these U.S. Attorney's Office, Asalyi out here in Central District of California, this Alina Habba in New Jersey, what's her name in Washington, D.C.? Come on, what's her name? The Fox TV.
Jean Pirro.
Jeanine Pirro. If you don't like a president going around appointing U.S. attorneys like that, putting them in office, even though in all three cases, it looks like the Senate won't confirm any of them. If you don't like that, vote Democratic next election.
Yeah, I mean, you could put that into the group of appointees that did get Senate confirmation that astound me. You can start wherever you want. Kash Patel, RFK Jr., Pete Hegseth. This is a rogues gallery of incompetence and of political fealty that is toxic to this nation, and we're seeing it play out that way.
Mark, can I interrupt for 1 second? There's a lawsuit actually against Kash Patel. Kash Patel allegedly not only fired this top FBI official, but given that he was going to fire him and realizing that he was probably going to get sued, supposedly told a whole lot of stupid things, self-incriminating things Kash Patel did that are now being used against him. They're being quoted against Kash Patel, explaining why he was firing this guy. And he was not fired, according to Kash Patel's own words, according to Hoyle or by the book, but totally politically and wrongly.
Yeah,
and,
they said it was mandated by the White House, that the White House wanted these people fired.
You're a career FBI employee with civil service protections. To have the head of the FBI come to you and say, you're doing a great job, but the president wants you fired, so you're fired.
That's exactly what happened.
Saying it out loud, it's saying all the misconduct, all the improprieties, it's saying them right out loud, supposedly Kash Patel did.
The suit is saying that Patel explained he had to fire the people his supervisors told him to fire, his superiors, because his ability to keep his own job depended on the removal of these agents who worked on cases involving the president. Patel explained that there was nothing he or anyone else could do to stop this or any other firing because the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it, meaning, the FBI at the time, the Biden FBI. He went up over after everybody did, Trump and the White House, who had fingerprints anywhere near anything that had to do with Trump. And he said, this is Patel saying it, that the firings were retaliatory. This is all in the lawsuit, saying that all FBI employees who had worked on the cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs regardless of their retirement eligibility status. I mean, there's real money involved here. This is what Trump did to Vindman after Vindman testified in the case against Trump for impeachment removal. He fired Vindman, and they fired him specifically to avoid paying any kind of retirement benefits, both Vindman, I think, and his brother as well. So,
since J. Edgar Hoover, there's never been a Democratic FBI director. Never. It's sort of remarkable. Like somehow or other, the Republicans always had that job. And, with some exceptions, they performed it very admirably. And I worked with a lot of FBI agents who I sort of just assumed, especially back in those days, the Reagan administration, very beginning of Bush, I assumed that almost all of them were Republicans, but it never showed in their work, Mark. It just never showed in their work. That's what people have to get through their heads. This idea that there's, some sort of political cabal trying to make sure that only Democrats or Republicans get punished. It's just, there are some FBI agents who weren't good. There were some ones who were like in the wrong assignment. They were doing white collar, and unless you walked into a bank with a gun and had a videotape, they were not really up to the job of a big white collar bank investigation. But that happens in everything. But there wasn't a political agenda, like they were not vigorously pursuing the bank because it was owned by a Republican. That just didn't happen. And these FBI agents, the ones who worked on Trump's case, they tried to get Trump. This was an assignment. Some of them probably found it interesting, not interesting. Probably some of them thought, wow, this will be an interesting thing to tell my kids. But it just wasn't like, I hate Trump, I want to get them. That's why I'm working on the Mar-a-Lago investigation. And one last thing about Mar-a-Lago, they were actually trying to clear Trump. They were trying to give Trump many exit ramps. Trump missed the exit ramps. He could have just said, oh, I found all this stuff.
You're talking about the documents at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah.
He could have given them back, and that would have been the end of it. He compounded it. He made the crime worse and worse and elevated it to a very serious crime by bullshitting them, Mark, and having his lawyer, according to a judge's finding, show it like a selective shell game, like say, hey, here's this room, and this is all I have. Now you can tell the government this is all I have. And the lawyer goes in there innocently and says, I examined this room, and that's all they have. And there are none of these national secret documents, because the allegations are Trump had moved them and put on this charade, put on this show for the lawyer. And all of those other
there are more
things,
than allegations. They demonstrated it. I mean, I
and
understand it
drowned
wasn't
them in the pool. Remember
adjudicated,
that?
but
They were going to flood them in the pool. They were going to flood some of the documents. And then they find them after he says, and his lawyer says, nothing to find there. They go in there on a search warrant, and they find them with their red and gold seals that they were top secret. I mean, anybody who remembers that case will remember that he was dead to rights on it. And then it went to his judge down there, Eileen Cannon, and the case got delayed and delayed. And then, of course, he got elected again.
So I wanted to, I'm really out of time, but I really wanted you to weigh in quickly on this new guidance from the Department of Education about prayer in public schools. President Trump making the speech at the Bible Museum this week. He said, "I'm pleased to announce this morning that the Department of Education will soon issue new guidance protecting the right to prayer in our public schools and its total protection." He didn't give any further details. It's kind of a broad stroke thing, but they talk a lot about religious liberty. I mean, I think it's really organized around a simple religious doctrine. That is to say, one religious doctrine. It's basically a Christian doctrine. But this Department of the Justice Department's Religious Liberty Commission is something that, again, would seem to fly in the face of that which is underpinning so much of American law, which is the separation of church and state, meaning if it's a public school, it's not a school which is usually integrated with any kind of religious doctrine.
Well, Trump is going nowhere on this, not even with his concierge Supreme Court, not even with the 3 justices that he picked of the 9. He's not going anywhere with this. This is like black letter law. This is on the bar exam. If you didn't answer questions about this right, you would have had trouble becoming a lawyer, because none of this is, separation of church and state. You can't have the 10 Commandments sitting in public classrooms all over. There's no historical tradition of having the 10 Commandments in a classroom. I was in a classroom. You were in a classroom years after me, of course, Mark. But when I was there and when you were there was no 10 Commandments in the classroom.
Yes, but David, let me just put this spin on it, because this is the spin that the government's going to put on it, which is, we're not saying put the 10 Commandments there. We're saying let these people pray in any kind of organized way they want to. Otherwise, it's a persecution against their religion and their religious rights. Why can't those kids have religious freedoms to pray? That's the way this starts.
Well, that's the way it starts. But I mean, I'll believe that it's neutral when, they have the Quran.
Sure.
And you're allowed to read. The person who's praying with their Quran will be treated just the same as everybody. There'll be a Muslim kid comes in. There'll be a Hindu kid who comes in and wants to pray in a different way. There are Sunday schools. There's after school. There's praying at home with your family. All of that is great, Mark. But he's not getting anywhere with this. But again, it's the whole performance. It's all heading toward the midterms, Mark, in just a year and a bit by now. Just a year and a bit. They're going to be incredibly important, those midterms. You see that some multimillionaire, I guess it's Munger, has already started spending money saying that we need to have good government. I don't remember his ads. Did he show ads in Texas telling them they should have good government? I don't remember Munger running those ads in Texas. He only seems to want to stop California with his counter move.
Apparently, Texas already has good government, David. So
not the move that started this all, where they tried to steal 5 Republican seats. They seem to be on the verge of stealing 5 Republican seats in Texas. And I guess Munger, with all of his millions, wants us to sit by idly and say, well, good government. We're going to just say, wow, we had good government. We have fascism in America, but we believe in good government. We voted in a way for good government because this multimillionaire put ads on that we should do so. Of course, I think the campaign to approve the redistricting in California, that hasn't even started yet. And I think that'll be a vigorous, well-funded
that's a big lift. I mean, and if it doesn't pass, then it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. It's sort of academic that the House will be controlled by the Republicans. I got to wrap up. David, can be found.
Last Katsadamas.
Yes,
that redistricting in California will win on the ballot in November.
Oh, all right. Well, that's the Katsadamas word. Redistricting wins in California, and then bring on the midterms. Find David on News Nation, and of course, he is defending those who can afford his services in Southern California. The former federal prosecutor. Now he's defending those wrongfully accused people who need a defense. We all need a defense, don't we? We all need a defense at times.
Why are you yelling?
David Katz.
My friends say only defend 2 types of people, the wrongly accused and the rightly accused. But who the hell knows? But who the hell knows when the case starts? Right?
We all need a vigorous defense.
Presumption of innocence.
See you next Thursday. David Katz, everybody. Bye, David.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I am excited. We did a lot today, and there's even more on the docket, to use a legal term, for tomorrow. Mark, Kim, and everyone says Susan Roberts, the $10 super chat, saying, as always, this will be a great show today, and my daughter is listening. Wow, that's very cool. I love that. Yeah.
Hi, Susan's daughter.
Susan Roberts, thank you. Really
It's not
appreciate
fake.
the love.
That's real.
Yeah, not fake. It's real. MAGA trying hard to create a martyr, says Detroit Microsound. Yeah, there is really, I think, a martyrdom already up around Charlie Kirk, and that's one of the things that makes this kind of act so heinous and awful. I mean, if you don't care about the humanity or the lack of humanity associated with it, I mean, if you care so much about the lack of humanity contained in so much of the Charlie Kirk rhetoric and hate speech, you have to be concerned about the lack of humanity associated with murder. Goebbels was a great organizer, Louise says, with a $5 super chat on college campuses with a highly successful nationwide book burning on 5/10/1933. Yeah, it's true. Joseph Goebbels was that guy, and Louise says, I'm not celebrating him either. Sort of saying, hey, look, you know, that the parallel to Charlie Kirk from Louise. Big Tuna says fascist regimes will sacrifice their own to continue the division and anger. Yeah, that is, I mean, maybe a tip of the hat to some kind of conspiracy. I don't know. Cousin Erie with a $10 super chat says, we tried to enact border law, but Trump preferred violence. Soldiers convicted of murder in Afghanistan and Trump thought they were heroes. That's true. Soldiers convicted of murder in Afghanistan, even taken up on war crimes here in this country, Trump pardoned them. Trump thought they were heroes, and I should be pure about this without Googling it. I know he pardoned at least one of them. And it was one very much celebrated with what were clearly war crimes. And look, he was court-martialed, taken up in a military court. Our current White House promotes violence at every turn, says Cousin Erie. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could dispute that. I mean, sadly, I think even on the heels of this entire event involving Charlie Kirk, there was a stirring of the pot. And of course, it's enabled almost immediately by what you see on Fox News Channel. I watched almost exclusively yesterday Fox News Channel coverage of the Kirk event. And they went right after it. Hannity goes right after it. You should have heard. Did I send it to you, Albert? I don't think I did. I'll run it tomorrow. Donald Trump's son, Eric, was on with Sean Hannity and just went off on Democrats and the fact that Democrats created all of this. That he went with the Russia hoax, the persecution of my family, that's what's led to all of this. I'll play you the cut tomorrow on this show. Hey, Mark, anything going on with the Epstein files? A moment of silence for the people who died on 9/11. Some people gave all, says Franco. Thank you for the $5 super chat. The Epstein file, and I think this is what you're implying, the Epstein file revelation, which was associated with the release of that birthday compendium of all of those greetings to Epstein.
Ooh, compendium would be a ding word. Compendium.
Compendium's a ding word.
Yeah.
It was sort of bumped out of the headlines by the Kirk thing, understandably, right? And similarly, the 9/11 memorial, I think, sort of coexists in the news cycle with the Charlie Kirk stuff, but the Kirk stuff is being, I think, so much focused upon. And again, understandably, a huge story. A political assassination in America, it's huge.
Yeah.
That it has bumped out the 9/11 memorial on some level. But it really does bear saying that we do ignore so much other gun violence every day. And so the gun violence that hit at the high school, the gun violence that hit today, there was more gun violence today, the other gun violence that we live with every day, and just want to talk political assassinations. I mentioned it yesterday when the Charlie Kirk story was breaking because I thought it was so interesting that Donald Trump quickly talked about the tragedy associated with Charlie Kirk and political violence, but didn't mention the political violence when the Minnesota legislator was shot and killed along with her husband in their home. Barely a mention at all from Donald Trump on that. So this picking and choosing by the right is scary because they've created a narrative and a profile that would suggest sort of the left is bent on some kind of violent destruction when I don't think that's reflected in the reality of all of these incidents.
And we don't even know who's responsible for this yet. I mean, it could just be some crazy person who's neither on the left nor the right. We don't know.
Angel in the Bay Area says, Tony and Albert, is it possible to reverb sound effects on all Trump clips? I mute Trump's voice. Rush Limbaugh was on KGO Sunday, late afternoons from 4 to 6. That was the first time I boycotted KGO. Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't know what you want me to do. I see all of your comments. Oh, my God, not another cut from Trump. The guy's president of the effing United States, man. What do you want me to do? Leave him out? I mean, I don't like it anymore. I can't believe he is president of the United States. I say it to myself out loud. I can't believe Donald Trump is president of the United States. It's what I say to you when I talk about the people of America. Don't tell me how honorable the people of America are, how they're going to come to their senses. You've seen the people of America. You've seen what they'll believe. You'll see what they fight for. They elected Donald Trump. Or they allowed the manipulation of Donald Trump, or however you want it, manipulation of votes, however you want to term it. We've permitted this on some level. We've really gotten complacent. You know, we sit on the couch, the NFL season starts, we play fantasy football, we go on DraftKings, we make all our DraftKings picks, then we eat a double Whopper and go, oh, yeah, what about the election? Yeah, I know, I've heard of the immigration, the border, yeah, and stuff's too expensive. I'm going with Trump. I know, you know, I get it. He's not politically correct, but I'll go with him. I mean, that's basically the arithmetic done by a ton of people. Yeah, I didn't like the vax thing, the vaccine thing. Yeah, what is the state telling me that I have to vaccinate my kids? I want to get government off my back. I'm going Republican. This is where we end up. I don't think there's any complex arithmetic being done. So again, Trump is the president. There will be more of what he says and does, because what he says and does affects our lives. So I'm not just going to, oh my God, no, Mark, no more Trump. I don't want to hear his voice. Tough. I think that's as dangerous as buying into what he says. Just like, I don't tell me when it's over. I'll be over here. I'm going to go watch Seinfeld reruns. All right. But you can do both. You can find your areas of peace. You can find your areas of calm. You can find the things that are beautiful about life. There's so much great about life and about life in America. I mean, we're acculturated as Americans. I am. I mean, I don't know what would happen if I have to go live overseas or in some other culture. I've done it. I was educated in part overseas. I couldn't wait to get back to America. I wrote a whole blues song about living in Europe, but wanting to get back to Europe, to America. But I'll tell you, there's a lot about Europe that is far more enticing than what's happening in America right now. There are also things happening in Europe that are suggesting a rise of fascism there that's scary. Well, all I'm trying to say is we can't ignore things here. We can enjoy things here while not ignoring a lot of what happens. So, I mean, I think these things are self-evident to most of you, but I still want to say it because I see it in the chat all the time. And it kind of bums me out. Like, we work hard to try to find you the right clips and to try to find you those things that are most relevant. But I understand, it's a sucky situation, and you don't want to hear the guy who's created it. So, who said this? The 1964 Civil Rights Act was a huge mistake. Oh, lovable Charlie. Yeah. Big Tuna says, hey, Mark, Charlie's assassination could be an inside job so that the right has a reason to attack the left, or could be the white supremacist because he wasn't in line with their rhetoric. Yeah, I mean, I get that. And in fact, that's what I was kind of talking about at the beginning of the show. You can put together a conspiracy theory since we know so little. But, so many have been part of a political movement, and somebody in their own political movement is more of a zealot than they are, and they're taken out that way. So that's possible. And it could also be a leftist or a lefty or it could be any number of things. And that's why right now the conspiracy theorists are running in to fill in their own narrative. And the president of the United States, Donald Trump, offered statements about the left having done this to Charlie Kirk. It was perpetrated by the left before he even knew, because none of us do know who the actual shooter is. So, Joan Hollywood with a $5 super sticker and a big shout out to Joan Hollywood. I feel like she's been very active today. Kim?
Yeah.
I'd like to hang out, but I have got to wrap up. Do you have anything before we leave?
I have so much, but I'm just going to give you 3 little tidbits. You know, they have that thing in People magazine, the unions and the passings, right? I want you to know that Oliver North married Fawn Hall.
Oh, yeah.
Them?
What? So Fawn Hall was his assistant when he was in government. Isn't that right?
Yeah, she was allegedly shoving documents down her pants that
right. Well, who hasn't
implicated
done
him
that?
so that they could shred them together and jammed up a shreding machine. And finally, they're
once
now
you've
married.
shredded together, don't you think a wedding is just in the offing?
Together, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's Oliver North and Fawn Hall. And remember Flo, Kiss My Grits? Flo on Alice?
From Alice?
Yeah. In real life, her name was Polly Holiday, and she passes away at the age of 88. So Flo, Kiss My Grits. Flo is no longer with us. So I thought that was sad. And
by the way, Oliver North, I think, is 85 or something like that. And Fawn Hall is probably, I don't know, what is she, 65 maybe?
Yeah, they're not spring chickens, but you know.
But hey, probably, what happened is his wife died, and now he's gone back to his assistant, and there they are.
There they are, yeah.
I saw her at Lord & Taylor, which is a department store in Washington. I don't know if it's still there, but you remember, I grew up in Washington. So I saw her at the time, and let me just say this, and she was, from here to there, like really close. She's a pretty gal, as my dad would say. She's a pretty gal.
And also, if
and he's handsome in his uniform. Go ahead. Yes,
of course.
Even as he breaks the law. Go ahead.
Even as he breaks the law. If you needed to take a helicopter anywhere, as one does, you could now call Uber, because Uber is going to let customers book helicopter rides through its app, which is very convenient, for those of us who are needing a quick ride. I think that's fantastic.
Great.
Really good.
No more paying the toll.
No more
just jump on the Uber.
Yeah.
The Uber chopper, Albert.
There's an Uber boat in London.
Really?
Uber boat. So I've taken
Uber
that.
boat.
Wow.
Uber boat, Uber chopper.
Wow.
Love it. So there you go.
Man, that's unreal. Yeah. All right, there it is. Look at that Uber chopper. Yeah.
And can we, just because I've been jonesing to show you guys this for the last 2 days, can we show that the shipping containers being dumped into the port of Long Beach? Are we allowed to do that?
They fell in. They weren't being dumped in.
Well, nobody was out there pushing them, but they did topple
into
the water. They have video, which is crazy, that shows dozens of these shipping containers aboard this ship at the port of Long Beach. Something happened. Maybe they weren't stacked properly. We don't know. Some fell onto the dry dock. Others tumbled right into the water. But the video is wild. Wonder what was in those.
Well, I mean, exactly. Yeah, all of your
splashdown.
What is that? The stuff, the low-cost stuff that's being affected by the tariffs now so dramatically.
Temu stuff headed to Walmart.
Temu, thank you. That's exactly it. Temu.
Yeah,
it's all your Temu stuff. I have to say that what they think happened on these. You're watching it now on YouTube. For those just listening, we just have been watching these. As Kim says, it is pretty dramatic as you watch these containers just cascade like dominoes. So these are immense. These things are 8,000 pounds empty. Okay. Yeah. But in any case, they think that the ship had a ballast issue and that the ballast was done. I mean, I think that's what I've read, but we'll see. Okay. I'm sure that there's a major investigation going on. And there will be a
problem. No one's getting fired. What?
There'll be insurance. There will be a lawsuit.
My bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think my bad. I'm sorry is going to do do it on this one. It's just not going to.
It was wrong. It was stupid, and I'm trying to be a better person.
Yeah. Well, I think you'll have to go full tubing on this one.
Listen to me. I don't want to hear you.
Yeah, Captain. I'd like to know more about what that.
I wanted to apologize to
what happened on that ship.
Asian American community.
Tomorrow. I will. I'll play you a couple of key cuts that I want to play for today, and we're just out of time. One of them involves Eric Trump talking about the effect the Democrats had in producing the murderous act that occurred yesterday at that Utah school against Charlie Kirk. We'll also talk about where we are now, and we'll know more tomorrow as well, as Michael Shore joins and Jim Avila as well. Also Florida tomorrow and more. And now the great Shadow takes us out.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
Kim's doing the After Party Live over on the After Party Live channel. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Remembering our 9/11 victims. Bye-bye.